The story begins in a quiet kitchen, where a pot simmers softly on the stove, setting a calm and ordinary mood until it's suddenly broken by an emergency broadcast on the television. The anchor's voice is urgent, repeating the alert again and again, making it clear that something serious is happening. A mysterious labyrinth has appeared in the Shibuya district, and all nearby residents are ordered to evacuate immediately. Outside, tension rises fast as a strange floating object glows intensely in the sky, pulsing with an unnatural energy. Soldiers are already on the streets, guiding civilians to safety, trying to maintain order as panic spreads. In the chaos, a frightened little girl is nearly swept away by the rushing crowd, her small figure lost among desperate people trying to escape. Everyone looks up in fear at the massive object hanging above them. Scene shifted to Japan. Within minutes, the army arrives with tanks, preparing to face whatever is coming. Then, without warning, the portal begins to open, releasing a massive surge of energy that shakes the surroundings. From inside, something begins to emerge, something not human. The creature crashes down with overwhelming force, shattering the ground beneath it. As the dust clears, its true form is revealed, a gigantic purple insect-like monster with glowing eyes that stare coldly at the humans below. The military instantly classifies it as hostile, and the commander orders all units to prepare for combat. Tanks line up and aim, but a soldier hesitates, warning that civilians are still evacuating. The captain understands the risk, but he also knows that waiting could mean total destruction. The order to fire is given. In an instant, the tanks unleash a coordinated barrage, explosions lighting up the entire area as the monster is swallowed by flames and smoke. Helicopters circle overhead while the battlefield disappears behind a thick cloud. For a brief moment, it seems like the attack worked, but then, to everyone's shock, the creature is still standing, completely unharmed, without a single scratch. The captain is stunned, unable to believe that even direct armor-piercing hits had no effect. The monster slowly glares at its attackers, its eyes glowing brighter as a terrifying amount of energy gathers in its mouth. Then, in a split second, it releases a devastating beam that tears through the battlefield, striking the tanks directly and obliterating them instantly. Inside one vehicle, a soldier can only stare in pure terror as the blinding light rushes toward him before everything is wiped out. Then, in an instant, the remaining tanks are sent flying like toys by the sheer force of the monster's attack, followed by a massive explosion that wipes out everything in its path. Panic spreads among the civilians as they run desperately, trying to escape the destruction unfolding around them. It's revealed that these mysterious structures appearing across the world are called labyrinth, and the creatures emerging from them have been classified as enemies by humanity. The worst part, none of these monsters can be defeated with existing weapons, leaving cities helpless as destruction continues unchecked. Amid the chaos, several smaller flying creatures suddenly appear, swooping down and attacking civilians without mercy. One of them strikes a man in the crowd, sending shock and fear through everyone nearby. At the same time, the little girl from earlier trips and falls, unable to get back up as the chaos surrounds her. A winged monster notices her and slowly approaches, raising its sharp claws, ready to strike the defenseless child. Just as it's about to land the final blow, a sudden red flash slices through the air, and in the blink of an eye, the creature is cut clean in half. The girl curls up on the ground in fear, only to realize she's been saved. Standing before her is a mysterious young man holding a glowing sword. As she looks up, relief and shock fill her eyes. It's explained that weapons discovered inside the labyrinths are the only ones capable of defeating these enemies. The young man, with striking red hair and glowing red eyes, calmly asks if she's hurt. But instead of responding, the girl becomes frightened, fixated on his unusual eyes. Slightly confused, he glances away, unsure why she's reacting that way. Suddenly, little girl noticed hand of that monster on a building. The girl looks up again, terrified, while the young man casually asks if his left eye is bothering her. Frozen in shock, tears forming in her eyes, she can't even respond. In the background, that monsters begin to attack, preparing for further destruction. He gently explains that his eye is simply a little different. At that very moment, the giant monster fires another devastating energy beam, slamming into the ground and creating a massive crater. And as if things couldn't get worse, a car thrown by the explosion comes crashing down toward them from above. But the young man calmly repeats that his eye is special, and as he says it, the power within it begins to awaken, glowing with an intense light. It's revealed that the weapons found inside the labyrinths go far beyond modern technology, and among them, the most powerful is known as a Regulus arm. As he activates it, A massive golden magic circle forms in the air, signaling the use of something extraordinary. Meanwhile, the little girl remains curled up on the ground, overwhelmed by fear, yet she slowly opens her eyes to see what her savior is doing. What she witnesses leaves her completely stunned. The falling car and even the monster's devastating energy beam are frozen mid-air, as if time itself has stopped. It's then explained that this ability affects everything within his field of vision, allowing him to halt the time of any object. This is why his eye is considered divine. The power is called the Eye of Chronostasis, and with it, he refuses to let the monster win. As the girl begins to grasp the sheer scale of his ability, the young man reveals the hidden cost behind it. Within his vision, an interface appears, displaying a life counter set at 27 years. But the moment he activates his power, that number begins to drop rapidly. He explains that every second he uses chronostasis consumes his own lifespan. In just a few moments, he has already lost an entire year of his life. Even so, he shows no hesitation, declaring that it doesn't matter. He pulls out a pistol to confront the enemy. It's revealed that using these weapons also requires a sacrifice, his lifespan. To fire the weapon, he willingly spends 30 days of his remaining life. Instantly, an interface appears, showing the weapon's cartridge charging with energy as a loading bar fills up. His glowing eye sharpens with focus as he raises the gun toward the sky, where it begins to radiate a powerful golden light. Once fully charged, the system announces the activation of dual chronostasis, and the pistol becomes enveloped in a red aura, humming with destructive energy. With everything prepared, the targeting system locks onto the monster's attack. A confident smile appears on his face as he declares he's ending this now. Without a moment of doubt, he pulls the trigger, unleashing a powerful red beam. It collides directly with the monster's attack in a blinding explosion of light, but his shot overpowers it, pushing through and striking the creature head-on with devastating force. With that, a gigantic red explosion occurs and engulfs the creature. The monster's body begins to completely fall apart because of the attack. Little by little, the creature is disintegrated by the intense red light until finally, there's nothing left of the enemy that was attacking the city. The young man stands there as the monster's remains vanish into the air. With the threat eliminated, time returns to normal, and the car crashes to the ground. He then thinks that he needs to at least earn back the lifespan he spent. Shortly after, the interface confirms that the enemy has been completely destroyed, and a new message appears saying he has received a life count. It's explained that by defeating enemies, it's possible to gain a new lifespan, and his life counter suddenly jumps up to 33 years in total. The little girl watches all of this, trembling with fear and not understanding a thing. Noticing her state, the young man turns to speak with the small survivor. He gives a gentle smile to try and calm the girl down after the big scare. But suddenly, a shadow flies quickly over the two of them. It was another flying monster, which arrives by attacking one of its companions. The young man picks up the girl and observes the other enemies that are still nearby. At that moment, a blue-haired girl lands right in front of them. The newcomer announces that they finished their work on their side as well. She says they're ready to go, and he comments that it's good to have reliable allies. The little girl watches their interaction, still scared, but a little calmer. The red-haired young man then approaches the little girl he saved. He kneels down and says that she's safe and that his team will find her family. The little girl tearfully thanks him for saving her life from that monster. Then, out of curiosity, she asks for the name of her red-haired hero. He replies that his name is Mogami Tendo, and that he's a type of soldier called a raider. After that, the group prepares for the next mission, and he calls them to conquer the labyrinth. We see Tendo's determined face, ready to take on any challenge that comes his way. It's explained that raiders are humanity's last guardians who fight against the enemies. The girl watches in awe those who saved her and protect the world, and this is the story of how a boy who was a nobody became the strongest raider. With that, Tendo and his team walk toward the entrance of the dangerous portal. One scene shifted on a dark night in Shinjuku. A group of mercilessly beats a young man in an empty alley, their laughter echoing as he sent crashing face first on the pavement. Mocking him, they joke that even a punching bag would have put up a better fight. Bloodied and barely able to move, Tendo Mogami lies there, muttering about his terrible luck, frustrated that he got caught up with people like them. Just as the beating continues, one of the bullies suddenly hesitates, suggesting they should stop. Confused, the others question him, but he reminds them that this guy's younger brother is someone they really don't want to mess with. Before they can react further, the sound of slow, steady footsteps echoes through the alley, instantly killing the tension. From the shadows, a tall man in a white overcoat emerges, his presence alone enough to silence everyone. With an eye patch and a cold, emotionless gaze, he walks forward, radiating overwhelming authority. The moment the thugs recognize him, panic sets in. He's no ordinary man, but a prodigy known as the strongest in Japan, Reiji Mogami. Without raising his voice, he glares at them and orders them to move. Terrified by his sheer presence, the punk said, "Am I going to be dead?" One while trembling said, "No, you are not." As silence returns, the prodigy calmly continues walking forward as if nothing had happened. Without even sparing a glance, he passes right by his injured older brother, offering no help at all. Shocked by the cold treatment, the young man struggles to lift his head and weakly calls out to him. Reiji barely turns, his expression unchanged, and coldly responds that his older brother is nothing but pathetic. With those harsh words, the so-called national hero simply walks away, leaving him behind on the dirty ground. Around them, whispers begin to spread, people murmuring that the prodigy truly despises his own brother. Known as the family's greatest shame, the young man lowers his head, crushed under the weight of humiliation and pain. Just then, the crowd reacts in surprise, noticing someone walking alongside the hero. Following closely behind is a graceful, yet heavily armed woman, her presence drawing everyone's attention. As she passes, she briefly glances at the fallen man from the corner of her eye before continuing on in silence. The onlookers begin comparing the twins, pointing out the overwhelming gap in their strength, their words cutting even deeper into the young man's already shattered pride. Lost in his dark thoughts, Tendo quietly wonders when everything between him and his brother went so wrong. The answer comes almost instantly, pulling him back to the exact moment their lives changed forever. In their childhood, the two ran freely through open fields under the bright sun, laughing and believing they were invincible. Back then, little Tendo was always smiling, fearless, and full of life. But that innocence was shattered in the worst possible way. 5 years ago, the skies suddenly turned dark as a massive labyrinth portal opened above the city, swallowing everything in chaos. Buildings crumbled and panic spread as the world they knew collapsed around them. Amid the destruction, the young boy watched helplessly as his perfect reality was torn apart. The ground beneath his feet began to crack, and little Reiji tried desperately to run, but fear completely froze him in place. Then, warning, the earth gave way, dragging his entire family into the endless darkness below. It felt like a living nightmare as the monstrous void consumed everything. In the end, he survived alone while losing his entire family to the abyss. Shortly after the tragedy, the army sealed off the area surrounding the massive portal that had changed the world forever. Inside a cold, silent hospital, the atmosphere was heavy with grief and shock. Sitting alone in the waiting room, wrapped in a blanket, the lone survivor struggled to process everything he had just been through. On the television, the news revealed a painful truth. The only person rescued alive from that nightmare was his older brother. Watching him on screen surrounded by paramedics, a crushing sense of helplessness filled his chest. For a moment, he tried to deny it, but deep down, he knew the truth. As they fell into the abyss, his brother had been desperately calling for help, reaching out to him, but he had done nothing. Frozen in fear, he could only stand there and cry, unable to save him. Even as his brother was pulled into the darkness, he couldn't move. After surviving that unimaginable ordeal, his younger brother awakened powers beyond human understanding. From that day on, they're split completely, leading them in opposite directions. Displayed across every massive screen in the city, Reiji is celebrated as the youngest conqueror, a living legend admired by the entire nation. Meanwhile, unable to find any place in the world, the boy walks the streets with his head lowered, quietly accepting his endless misfortune. People whisper as he passes, their words sharp and cruel, pointing at him as nothing more than the hero's flaw, his failed counterpart. Each comment cuts deeper, slowly draining the last bit of light from his eyes. With a faint, bitter smile, he begins to believe in himself, accepting the humiliating label placed on him. Standing before the glowing screens, he fully embraces his role as the one stain on his brother's perfect legacy. But reality soon pulls him back to the present, the cold, unforgiving alley. Tendo Mogami lies there, suffering the consequences of his weakness as the pain from the earlier beating surges through his battered body. With no time to dwell on the past, a sudden kick slams into his back, forcing the air out of his lungs. Treated like nothing more than trash, he can't help but wonder what someone as useless as him could ever do to change. Frustration boils over, and his bloodied fist tightens as anger and self-hatred take hold. But just as the beating continues, everything suddenly stops. The attackers freeze, their attention drawn upward as the sky begins to shift. A heavy, suffocating pressure fills the air. Struggling, he lifts his head, his vision trembling, only to see a sinister purple glow, a massive sphere of dark energy forms overhead, twisting reality itself. Then, with a deafening blast, waves of destruction explode outward, instantly sending the thugs flying. Seeing the strange, bubbling anomaly in the sky, the boy quickly pieces it together. A labyrinth has just formed right above him. As reality itself cracks open, a drop of pure liquid-like energy falls from above and gently touches the ground. The moment it does, a dark fracture spreads rapidly across the asphalt, racing straight toward him. With no strength left to escape, shadowy tendrils burst out and instantly swallow his broken body. As darkness consumes him, glowing holographic panels suddenly appear, scanning and restoring his injuries. Surrounded by a surreal blue aura, his eyes widen in shock, unable to comprehend what's happening. Within seconds, the system completes its process, announcing the successful registration of a new conqueror. Bright neon letters flash before his eyes, welcoming him to the deadly labyrinth. And before he can react, a swirling black hole opens beneath him, violently pulling him into another dimension. Chill. 2. When our hero opened his eyes, he was inside of a dungeon. Slowly regaining consciousness, he lifts himself up, confusion written all over his face as he tries to understand what just happened. Still shaken from being dragged into another dimension, in front of him stretches a massive, shadowy corridor. Its eerie atmosphere making one thing clear. This is no ordinary place, but a deadly labyrinth. Panic sets in as the realization hits him all at once. He's fallen straight into its trap. Suddenly, a sharp mechanical beep rings out near his ear, making him flinch. Startled, he instinctively touches his face, searching for the source of the sound. Then, right before his eyes, a glowing blue interface appears, floating in midair. Fixated on the strange holographic display, he notices a timer counting down from 69 years, his lifespan. Completely confused, Tendo struggles to make sense of it, but he's not alone. The same thugs who beat him earlier are nearby, shouting in panic as they see identical displays. To make things worse, he realizes they've all been dragged into this nightmare together. Just then, the strange interface flickers again, locking onto the gang leader. Above the arrogant bully's head, a number appears, 83 years of life remaining. Shocked by what he's seeing, the boy struggles to understand what kind of bizarre system or this could be. But before he can make sense of it, something at the far end of the corridor catches his attention. Lined up neatly along the hall are dark metal pedestals, each one faintly glowing. Drawn in by curiosity and desperation, he slowly approaches, every step filled with caution. Deep down, his instincts tell him this might be his only chance to survive. As he gets closer, his expression shifts to surprise. Resting within one of the heavy stands is a sleek, high-tech sword, almost as if it's waiting for someone to claim it. Realizing the danger he's in, he quickly understands these weapons are meant for survival. Hesitating for a moment, he reaches out to grab the mysterious blade. Just behind him, hidden in the shadows, the gang leader spots the weapon and immediately flashes a greedy smile. As Tendo's fingers brush the cold metal, the blade suddenly hums, vibrating with raw energy. Before he can react, he's violently shoved aside, crashing onto the hard floor as the thug calls him worthless trash. Without hesitation, the bully declares the weapon his, forcefully claiming it as his own. Groaning in pain, Tendo struggles to sit up, his body still aching from the earlier beating. But then, something strange happens. The thug suddenly freezes, reacting to a robotic voice echoing out of nowhere. Watching him speak to empty air, Tendo is left confused by the bizarre sight. At the same time, a system interface appears before him, explaining the weapon, a vibration sword. As the details unfold, a chilling truth is revealed. Using the blade costs 30 years of lifespan. Yet despite the warning, the thug ignores it completely and draws the massive sword. Immediately, a sharp alarm begins ringing in Tendo's ears as the system reacts to the weapon being drawn. Through the glowing interface, the number above the thug's head starts changing in real time. In a single terrifying moment, his lifespan drops drastically, from over 80 years to barely 50. Shocked, Tendo realizes the numbers aren't just information. They're real and dangerously so. Meanwhile, gripping the glowing blade, the thug bursts into laughter, convinced he's become invincible. Drunk on power, he even mocks the strongest conqueror in Japan, believing he's now above everyone. Before he can react, his expression freezes. In a split second, a red flash slices through him, and his head is torn apart into pieces, splattering across the wall. His body collapses, blood pouring out uncontrollably. Frozen in fear, Tendo watches in horror as something deadly drops from above. The creature responsible for the kill crashes down onto the floor, the impact cracking the stone beneath it. Now fully revealed, its terrifying form sends the remaining thugs into complete despair. Covered in bone-like armor with a single glowing ruby eye, its presence alone feels overwhelming. Trembling in fear, Tendo instinctively steps back, raising his guard despite knowing he stands no chance. Behind the creature, the bully's headless corpse begins to twist unnaturally before dissolving into gray dust as if erased from existence. Stunned, Tendo watches in disbelief as the system beeps again, confirming the target's elimination. On the floating interface, the thug's life counter drops to 0 without hesitation. Panic takes over, and Tendo shouts for everyone to run. But it's already too late. The monster flexes its body, metallic claws gleaming as it locks onto its next target. Then, in a sudden burst of speed, it launches forward like a missile, charging straight at him. Caught completely off guard by the creature's terrifying speed, he instantly realizes this might be the end. As the monster closes in, its mechanical eye glows right in front of him, locked onto its prey. Driven by pure survival instinct, the young man forces himself to move, sprinting toward another weapon resting on a nearby pillar. With a desperate burst of strength, he rips out a massive greatsword, turning to face the incoming attack. The moment he grabs it, the system activates, draining 30 years of his life and leaving him with only 39. The weight of that loss hits him instantly, but there's no time to think. Clutching the heavy blade, he tries to escape, cursing the cruel rules of the labyrinth. But fate isn't on his side. His path is suddenly blocked by a solid wall of dark stone. Skidding to a halt, he realizes he's trapped in a dead end. Behind him, the monster charges like a missile, slicing through the air with unstoppable force. Tightening his grip on the sword, his hands trembling, Tendo struggles to gather his courage. Doubt creeps in under the overwhelming pressure. But with a surge of anger, he forces his fear aside, plants his feet, and charges forward to fight. With a desperate roar, the boy swings his blade with all his strength, betting everything on a single vertical strike meant to split the enemy in half. But the creature proves far beyond his expectations. Moving with unnatural speed, it effortlessly dodges the attack, making his strongest move look meaningless. Realizing his mistake too late, a cold sweat runs down his face as his guard is left completely open. Hovering above him like a predator, the beast positions itself perfectly, ready to finish the fight. In a swift and merciless counterattack, its massive claw comes down, slicing through his clothes and tearing into his flesh. A scream escapes him as unbearable pain spreads across his chest, burning deep into his body. The force of the blow sends him crashing to the ground, knocking the breath out of him. Lying there, surrounded by his own blood, he groans weakly, feeling his strength fade. Despair begins to take over as he curses his own weakness. On the brink of giving up once again, he wonders if this is how it all ends. Until suddenly, a blinding flash cuts through the darkness, saving him at the very last moment. Sparks burst through the air as a high-tech blade suddenly intercepts the monster's deadly claw, stopping it in its tracks with overwhelming force. Standing firm before the beast is Reiji, his eye patch and chilling aura radiating pure dominance. Seeing him appear so suddenly, the older brother's eyes widen in complete shock, barely able to believe who just saved him. Yet without even acknowledging the danger, the prodigy lets out a cold scoff, criticizing him for wasting his life so recklessly. With his back turned to the injured Tendo, he harshly mocks him for getting beaten so easily, even while holding a weapon. Still lying on the ground, Tendo struggles to speak, barely managing to call out his brother's name. His grip tightens around his sword as the humiliation cuts deeper than his wounds. Completely merciless, Reiji tells him to crawl away and die somewhere if he has no will to fight. Biting his lip in frustration, Tendo lets out a shaky breath. Then, as Reiji steps forward toward the monster, he calmly prepares to draw his own weapon. As he raises his sword, now crackling with lethal electricity, the younger brother calmly warns that survival in this place means fighting until the very end. The overwhelming magical pressure surrounding him fills the air, making it hard to even breathe. Without looking back, he coldly orders Tendo to stay behind him and not interfere, promising to get him out alive. His firm and unshakable stance sends chills down Tendo's spine. Confused by this sudden protectiveness, he can't understand why someone who despises him would go this far to save him. One thug screaming loud. Then, with explosive speed, he charges forward, stating that risking his life to protect others is the only rule he follows. In a flawless motion, he strikes, his movements precise and powerful. Watching in awe, Tendo realizes he's witnessing the true strength of the nation's greatest conqueror, something he can never forget. With sweat on his face and his jaw nearly dropping, the boy's terror slowly transforms into overwhelming admiration. Pushed to the edge of the battlefield, he forgets his own pain, completely absorbed in the clash unfolding before him. The hero moves through the air like an untouchable god of war, each motion sharp and precise, carving his strength into the very soul of anyone watching. In a flawless sequence, he delivers the final strike, his blade slicing clean through the monster's armor, tearing it apart as if it were nothing. Sparks burst like neon fragments, scattering across the dark space as the creature is completely destroyed. Every movement, every impact reflects overwhelming power and control, making it clear that the one standing there is no ordinary fighter, but a true savior. Watching his younger brother dominate the battlefield alone, something changes within Tendo. Deep inside, a small spark ignites, an ambition he thought he had lost. For the first time, his blood begins to boil with determination. As the warrior stands tall, his white coat swaying with quiet authority, he embodies pure strength, pride, and respect. Then, shifting focus to the world's tragic history, everything began 38 years ago with the appearance of Labyrinth Zero. These massive egg-like structures floated silently above major cities, defying all known science and plunging the world into chaos. From the Statue of Liberty to Christ the Redeemer, these dimensional rifts appeared without warning, spreading fear across the globe. As nations struggled to respond, scientists and military forces worked tirelessly, studying the labyrinths under extreme pressure. Over time, they uncovered 3 unbreakable rules that defined humanity's survival. First, anyone who enters a labyrinth can only escape by defeating the guardian hidden deep within. It's a one-way gamble with death. Second, ignoring these structures is not an option, because the monsters inside will inevitably overflow, bringing destruction to the outside world. And third, conventional weapons are completely useless against these creatures, making it necessary to rely on special armaments found within the labyrinths themselves. From this harsh reality, a new class of warriors emerged, those willing to risk everything by entering these death traps. They became known as conquerors, humanity's last line of defense. Back in the present, with the immediate threat eliminated, the surviving group gathers together, exhausted and shaken. Breaking the heavy silence, Tendo finally speaks, recalling everything he knows about these deadly labyrinths. Turning his head with a sharp, piercing gaze, Reiji acknowledges the explanation, praising the textbook knowledge, but quickly points out that something crucial is missing. In a harsh reality check, Reiji makes it clear that being a conqueror isn't a title to be admired, but more like a biological sentence. Without sugarcoating anything, he reveals the truth. The moment Tendo and the others entered the labyrinth, they were already chosen and marked by the system. As he walks calmly across the stone floor, his voice steady, he explains that even the air inside this place begins to alter a person's body, slowly rewriting their very biology. With a faint cynical smirk, he challenges Tendo, asking if he didn't feel something strange stirring within himself earlier. Lost in thought, the pieces suddenly come together. The glowing blue light that healed his wounds, the strange sensations in his body, it all starts to make sense. What once felt like game-like magic now becomes something real and dangerously unavoidable. Realizing this, Tendo quickly turns his focus back to the floating interface. Hands trembling, he opens his status screen, staring at the numbers that now define his fate. Pointing at the floating numbers with a trembling finger, Tendo watches in disbelief as his lifespan drops to a dangerously low 37 years. His breath catches as the reality begins to sink in. Ahead of him, his younger brother suddenly stops, his posture stiff, waiting for that understanding to fully hit. Then, without warning, the number drops again. 2 more years gone in an instant, even though he hasn't used any weapon. Panic floods his mind as everything starts falling into place. In a cold, matter-of-fact tone, the prodigy confirms the truth. Those numbers represent their life itself. Every second, every action, even survival comes at a cost. He explains that their bodies now automatically consume lifespan to heal damage, no matter how severe. Shocked, Tendo looks down at his body. His leg, which had been badly injured moments ago, is now completely restored. Even the fatal wound in his chest has vanished without a trace. The horrifying logic becomes undeniable. As he touches his clothes, still torn from the injury, the truth hits even harder. What felt like a miracle is nothing more than a cruel exchange. Then, locking eyes with him, his brother delivers the final blow. If that number ever reaches 0, it's over. No second chances, no escape, just death. Frozen by fear, a cold chill runs down Tendo's spine as the full truth sinks in. He had been dangerously close to death without even realizing it. Reiji, calm yet merciless, explains that no one inside a labyrinth gets the luxury of dying peacefully. Every warrior here is destined to burn through their life just to survive. The more big the damage, the more lifespan it needed, and you die if it reached 0. But just as he tries to regain control, Reiji's expression sharpens. His instincts flare as he senses something dangerous lurking above. In a single fluid motion, he draws his weapon and takes a battle stance, warning that the brief calm is already over. Suddenly, from the shadowy ceiling, multiple white, grotesque creatures drop down at incredible speed, surrounding them instantly. Panic surges through Tendo as the ambush closes in, and he desperately calls out for help. But before fear can take over completely, Reiji moves. With a swift acrobatic leap, he cuts through the swarm effortlessly, his blade tearing through the air like a storm. In the next instant, a burst of blue energy erupts upward, wiping out the remaining threats in a dazzling counterattack. Stunned by the sheer speed of what just happened, Tendo can barely process the scene in front of him. Surrounded by the still warm remains of the monsters, it dawns on him that the entire room was cleared in less than a second. Meanwhile, Reiji stands completely unfazed, calmly lowering his sword as if it was nothing more than routine. Any pride in his voice, he explains a crucial rule of survival here. By destroying a monster's core can gain back lifespan. Intrigued, Tendo looks down at a glowing sphere lying near his brother's feet, cleanly split in half, showcasing his terrifying precision. Letting out a nervous smile, he quietly doubts he'll ever reach that level of skill. Just then, the system suddenly beeps again, displaying the prodigy's life stats. The number that appears leaves him speechless. 189 years. The sheer amount feels unreal. Realizing what it means, Tendo understands how many monsters his brother must have killed to reach that point. His gaze slowly lowers as the truth sinks in. The burden his younger brother carries, fighting alone to protect everyone, feels heavier than ever. Yet he stands there silently, without seeking recognition. In a blunt and emotionless tone, Reiji states that humanity would have been wiped out long ago if they hadn't drowned themselves in blood to keep it alive. Hearing that, Tendo lowers his head, silently accepting the harsh truth about how fragile this world really is. Without wasting another second, Reiji resumes moving forward, his heavy footsteps echoing with authority through the stone corridor. The group of frightened civilians quickly follows behind, clinging to hope as they descend deeper into the dungeon. Then, just as they turn the next corner, the leader announces that the exit is finally closed. Stepping into a massive hall, they're greeted by the glowing light of a purple portal, illuminating the path ahead. Radiating with stable energy, the rift promises a safe return to the surface. Relief floods through Tendo as a smile spreads across his face. This nightmare might finally be over. But just as hope takes over, everything stops. Reiji suddenly raises his voice, blocking the path and freezing everyone in place. Reiji draws his sword, his stance shifting as he prepares to strike at anything lurking in the shadows near the portal. From the darkness, a lone silhouette begins to emerge, moving right in full speed. Without hesitation, he locks onto the figure. But then something dropped near them. Reiji shocked. It was that monster. Then for where the monster dropped, a figure emerged, a beautiful yet deadly woman with striking purple hair. With calm confidence, she introduces herself as an ally. Officer Yui Mizusaki has arrived. For maintaining a calm, professional tone, Mizusaki reports that she's relieved to find Reiji is safe. She quickly summarizes her mission, explaining that she managed to escort several civilians along the way, but her voice falters slightly, her expression turning grim. Reading between the lines, the captain immediately understands that not everyone made it out alive. Meanwhile, Tendo, still shaken, snaps out of his daze as he recognizes her face. Stammering awkwardly, he points at her, blurting out that he saw her earlier alongside the hero. Curiosity quickly overtakes his fear, and without thinking, he asks if she's his secret girlfriend. The question instantly shatters the tension, but not in a good way. With a cold expression, Reiji dismisses the idea entirely, stating that he has far better taste, and that she's nothing more than a capable subordinate. Clearly offended, Mizusaki shoots back, demanding to know what's wrong with her appearance. Not interested in pointless arguments, she shifts her attention to Tendo, asking who he is. Letting out a tired sigh, Reiji reluctantly reveals the truth. This unlucky battered boy is his brother, forcing an awkward connection between them. Gathering what little courage he has, The protagonist awkwardly extends his hand for a greeting. But the moment their eyes meet, the warrior shuts him down completely, looking at him with pure disgust and bluntly insulting him. Any chance of a friendly exchange is crushed instantly. Ignoring Tendo's visible embarrassment, the Reiji shifts focus back to the mission, asking about the number of enemies encountered and confirming that the path ahead seems clear. Despite the calm surroundings, something feels off. Trusting his instincts, the Reiji senses a hidden danger lurking nearby, a trap waiting to be triggered. Without wasting time, he quickly formulates a plan and orders Mizusaki to escort the civilians through the glowing portal without hesitation. Determined to handle the threat himself, he turns away and begins walking alone into a side corridor, disappearing into the darkness. Watching him leave, Tendo feels a mix of worry and disbelief, calling out to him by name. But the figure is already gone, swallowed by the labyrinth's shadows. Letting out a nervous laugh, Tendo reflects on his own weakness, realizing he at least owes his brother a proper thank you. Taking charge, Officer Yui firmly guides the group forward, urging everyone to cross the portal quickly. Demanding everyone form a single file line at the edge of the glowing escape portal, the officer struggles to keep the rising panic under control. As fear spreads among the civilians, she activates her tactical visions, scanning the surroundings for any hidden threats. Suddenly, her focus locks on Tendo, ordering him to stay in group. Then the structure of the dungeon begins to distort as a sinister force tears through it. Without any warning from the system, a massive spike of pure darkness crashes down from above, piercing through all civilians, blood spread all around. Her eyes widen in fear at the sheer destructive power. For a split second, she's stunned by its speed, but she reacts just in time, raising her weapon to block the crushing strike, her arms trembling under the monster's overwhelming strength as sparks explode across the floor. Then, the true source of the chaos reveals itself. A massive figure descends from above, clad in heavy corpse-like armor, radiating pure menace. Its presence alone suffocates the area, as if despair itself has taken form. Without hesitation, the boss begins charging a devastating attack, its weapon glowing with chaotic energy. There's no time to react. The shockwave explodes outward, and with no defense to protect him, Mizusaki takes the full force head-on. Her body is sent flying violently through the air, crashing across the wall as debris and dust erupt around her. The explosion engulfs everything, turning the escape route into complete chaos. Tendo in shock. The hope he felt just moments ago, when the portal promised escape, is instantly crushed. Fear takes over again, stronger than before, as his body trembles uncontrollably. Blood fills his mouth, the metallic taste reminding him how badly he's hurt. Suddenly, a spray of warm liquid hits his face, someone else's blood. Before he can react, a massive shadow looms behind him. The boss has already closed the distance. Raising its weapon, the creature prepares to finish him. Desperately clutching his face, Tendo tries to stop the bleeding only to realize half of it has been torn apart from the impact. The pain is unbearable. A scream rips from his throat as his body begins to shut down, his vision fading into darkness. Above him, the armored monster prepares to finish the job, slowly spinning its massive blade with terrifying intent. System warns the lifespan of him starting to go down. Then, like a falling guillotine, the blade comes crashing down, aimed directly at his exposed head. But at the very last instant, a blur of blue cuts through the scene. The strike is stopped. Standing between death and destruction, the prodigy reappears, blocking the attack with sheer strength. His glowing eyes lock onto the enemy as he plants his feet firmly into the cracked ground, holding back the crushing force. Watching through blood and pain, Tendo realizes his brother came back just to save him again. But the monster doesn't stop. Pushing harder, it forces down with overwhelming power, driving the hero's knee into the stone beneath him. Unable to withstand the overwhelming force of the attack, one of Reiji's arms gives out under the pressure. In a brutal instant, his armor shatters, and with a clean, merciless strike, his forearm is severed completely. It flies through the air, blood spraying in every direction before the limb crashes to the ground alongside his broken weapon. For a moment, everything freezes. Even his breathing stops as he stares in disbelief at what just happened. His strongest defense gone in a single second. Shocked by the sheer power of the enemy, he struggles to understand how such a creature could destroy a high-level weapon so effortlessly. As he stares into the void, trying to process the monster's strength, a chilling realization sets in. This is something far beyond anything humanity has ever encountered. With a gaze colder than ever, Reiji seals his bleeding wound, taking a slow, controlled breath as he accepts the cost paid with his own flesh. He realizes wasting lifespan carelessly would be suicide. Then, as if flipping a switch, his entire presence changes. Blue electricity surges around him, his fury igniting as a powerful aura spreads through the space, signaling that he's no longer holding back. From the ground, Tendo screams in despair, pointing at the severed arm, horrified by what he's seeing. But Reiji only responds with a cold, almost unhinged smile, dismissing it as nothing more than damage that can be recovered through the labyrinth's twisted system. Tendo feels the overwhelming gap between himself and the fighters before him as the glowing numbers continue to flash without mercy. The system deducts a shocking 30 years just to restore the severed limb, and he watches in disbelief as the total drops sharply from 189 to 156. The reality is terrifying. Every action comes at a deadly cost. Frozen in place, he can't help but question their sanity. Struggling to understand, he demands to know how his brother plans to fight like this without killing himself. But there's no time for doubt. Gritting his teeth, Reiji declares he'll end it in a single move. As he speaks, his cursed red eye begins to glow, unleashing a hidden power, which is none other than time-stopping. As he moves, the system confirms that his special power, the Eye of Time-Stopping, is fully activated. The Black Knight raises its massive sword, but it stopped midair cause of Reiji's attack. Reiji's red eye shines brighter than ever, showing he's using his power at full strength. He stopped it. At the last second, he moves with incredible speed, sliding under the knight to catch it off guard. He delivers a fast, precise strike aimed directly at its weak spot. But something feels wrong. When he lands, he realizes the attack barely did anything. The knight slowly turns toward him, completely unharmed, its armor untouched, and Reiji understands. This enemy won't go down that easily. Reiji quickly realizes this enemy is on a completely different level from anything they faced before. The Black Knight turns toward him, its presence heavy and threatening. Without warning, it launches a long-range attack using a whip made of pure energy. In an instant, Reiji understands the target isn't him, it's his brother. Without even thinking twice, he activates the Eye of Time, stopping again. The deadly whip freezes midair, stopping just inches from Tendo's terrified face. Moving at incredible speed, Reiji rushes in and places himself between the attack and his brother. For a brief moment, time itself stands still. Tendo, completely shocked, loses balance and falls backward. Reiji lands firmly in front of him, ready for whatever comes next. His red eye glows again, and he can't go the attack. The knight immediately, which was about to hit Tendo, hit the ground, causing a massive explosion of dust and debris, shaking everything around them. Reiji rushed toward the monster then and landed a strike on monster. Reiji taunts the monster, telling it that its real opponent is standing right in front of it. From the ground, Tendo watches the intense fight unfold in the middle of the hall, completely overwhelmed and confused. Still trying to recover, he can't understand what's been happening while he was down. Meanwhile, the battle continues at incredible speed, each clash more intense than the last. Then suddenly, everything changes. The Black Knight stops midair, surrounded by glowing golden rings that spin around its body. Tendo stares in shock, unable to process how the monster has frozen like that. It just hangs there, completely motionless, as if time itself has been stopped. Realizing the opportunity, Reiji doesn't hesitate. He moves instantly, closing the distance in a flash. With perfect timing, he strikes. His glowing blade cuts through the air and lands a clean, precise hit on the immobilized Black Knight. Taking full advantage of the opening, Tendo stares at the glowing golden rings around the knight, wondering if they're the source of this strange power. That's when it clicks. It's not the rings at all, it's his brother's eye. With his ability active, Reiji keeps up the pressure, landing another strong hit on the monster. Watching closely, Tendo finally understands that Reiji's eye is what's stopping time and allowing him to fight on equal footing. Still, the exact way it works confuses him. Then, a new detail appears on the system interface. The knight is repairing itself. At the same time, Reiji's lifespan continues to drop, the numbers steadily decreasing. Tendo's heart sinks as he realizes the cost. The more his brother uses that power, the more his life is being consumed. The truth hits hard. It's a dangerous trade. Even so, Reiji doesn't slow down. He keeps attacking without hesitation, and with one precise strike, he finally manages to crack and break the knight's helmet. Reiji takes a breath and admits he's finally managed to crack the monster's armor. But there's a serious problem. With only one arm left, he knows he can't deliver the final blow needed to finish it. Sensing the opening, the Black Knight doesn't hesitate. It lashes out instantly, using its sharp wings and whipping tail to launch a brutal counterattack. The strike lands clean. Watching this, Tendo's heart drops. He screams his brother's name in pure desperation, realizing the situation has turned dangerously bad. For the first time, it feels like even Reiji might lose. Panic and fear take over as Tendo grips his sword tightly, telling himself he has to help. But doubt hits just as fast. His hands shake as he questions what someone like him could even do in a fight like this. Feeling completely useless, he hesitates. Then suddenly, cutting through the chaos, Reiji shouts at him, pulling his focus back to the battlefield. The raider yells at him, asking how long he's going to just stand there like a useless scarecrow. He tells Tendo to get out of the way because he's only in the way of the fight. Lowering his head, the red-haired boy admits he's right. He really is just dead weight. He thinks a genius like Ryuji could never lose because he's so strong, so different from him. All Tendo believes he can do is get out of the way, fast, so he doesn't slow his brother down. But then something catches his eye, and it freezes him. Among the rubble, he sees his brother's subordinate, Misaki, lying there. His vision zooms in, showing she still has 39 years of life left. Though groaning in pain, the blue-haired officer is still conscious. Relief washes over Tendo. She's alive. Then his gaze shifts back to Ryuji, and understanding hits him. His brother wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to protect Mizusaki and Tendo. Even in that battered state, he kept going so no one else would be hurt. Reiji shouts at him not to stop, to keep moving forward. But Tendo feels frozen in place, crushed by his own helplessness, frustrated at being completely useless in the chaos around him. He runs. Meanwhile, the battle rages on, and Ryuji keeps his full focus on the Black Knight. The raider nimbly dodges another strike from the monster's energy whip. The dark creature doesn't relent, preparing a new attack with its twisted weapon. But Ryuji blocks it skillfully with his light sword. The impact cracks the Black Knight's core even further. For a brief moment, the younger brother and the monster lock eyes, each waiting for the other's next move. Then the knight unleashes a surge of purple energy, summoning multiple dark energy tentacles that lash toward Ryuji from all directions. The raider is caught off guard, trapped by the crushing grasp of the powerful limbs. He grits his teeth, straining to break free as the creature tightens its hold. The scene flashes back, and some bully kids are encouraging little 7-year-old Reiji to hit a beehive. However, little Ryuji was too scared and admitted that he couldn't do it. With that, the other boys pushed him roughly to the ground and called him a coward for not having the courage to try. Then, they began laughing loudly, mocking him as a crybaby until suddenly something struck them in the face. Little Tendo appeared and demanded to know if they had the nerve to touch his little brother. With a confident smile on his face, the older brother prepared himself to defend the younger one. The bullies looked confused and noticed a strange, sweet smell as they wiped their faces. Tendo then revealed that he had thrown honey on them and ran off quickly to put his plan into action. He struck the beehive with a branch, and almost immediately, the bullies were surrounded by a furious swarm of bees. To their absolute terror, a giant bee appeared, ready to attack them. The boys screamed in desperation and began running as fast as they could from the enraged swarm. They yelled at Tendo, blaming him for all the trouble caused by the bees. Little Ryuji gazed at his older brother with pure admiration and deep respect. Tendo then turned toward him and promised that he would always protect him, no matter what happened. The younger boy was speechless, staring at his hero with eyes that shone with admiration. Ryuji remembered that back then, his brother's back had seemed dazzling to him. In the present, Reiji continued to fight with all his strength against the monstrous foe. Suddenly, the Black Knight's tail split into several in a surprise attack, and the white-haired boy was struck head-on by a devastating blow. His eye glowed fiercely, and a magic circle appeared, demonstrating his remarkable ability. Using his power, he managed to stop the Black Knight's tentacles midair. Even so, the impact still sent him flying, thrown far away from the force of the strike. The genius muttered that he had not wanted to rely on the Eye of Chronostasis, yet he had no other choice. The interface displayed his life counter and indicated that his right arm was healing. With that, his lifespan dropped from 153 to 152 years. He realized that a fatal blow would cost over 100 years of life to fully recover. The white-haired boy noted that the monster's core would break with just one more attack, but acknowledged that landing it would be extremely difficult because of the creature's speed. He defended himself from a tentacle, using his arm as a makeshift shield. With a determined look, he prepared to continue the fight despite the clear disadvantage. The hero dodged another swift and powerful attack from the Black Knight with remarkable agility. His red eye glowed intensely as he analyzed the enemy's precise movement, calculating every possible outcome. Then he revealed that he had managed to freeze 6 of the tentacles using the eye of chronostasis, a feat that gave him a small but crucial advantage. The genius concluded that this meant there was only 1 tentacle left for him to worry about. While the Black Knight readied itself to strike with the last tentacle, it could still move. He realized that his chance to win would only last for an instant, and that he could not afford a miss. With all other tentacles immobilized, he steeled himself for the final attack on the monstrous creature. The monster's core was now fully exposed, teetering on the verge of shattering completely. With a fierce battle cry, the white-haired boy charged forward, determined to end the fight once and for all. A flashback of Tendo surfaced, and he reflected on how weak he had once been. He remembered the day the labyrinth had appeared when he saw that monstrous shadow. Tendo blamed himself for letting his family perish on that terrible day, knowing he was the only one left to live on in relative peace after the entire tragedy. The boy felt pathetic for always being protected by others instead of standing and fighting on his own. Ryuji remembered that day clearly and realized that it was the reason he had become stronger. Flashbacks showed the young white-haired boy training tirelessly day and night, determined to overcome his weakness. He practiced with his sword relentlessly, pushing his body to the limit so he would never have to rely on anyone's help again. Exhausted, he would sit on the ground surrounded by broken wooden targets, yet never gave up. All of this was driven by a single purpose, to ensure he would never need someone to protect him in battle ever again. In the present, Reiji faced his enemy with unwavering determination. The knight struck with its last tentacle, but the genius had anticipated it. Reiji was hit squarely in the chest, but resolved that this time he would be the one to protect someone important to him. Reiji smiled slightly, seeing that his plan had worked exactly as expected. It turned out that he had used his power at the very last second to freeze the last tentacle, leaving the enemy completely paralyzed. With the Black Knight unable to move, he moved in for the finishing blow. The interface froze on the Black Knight's core, notifying him that his arm was under repair. Shortly after, a new message confirmed that the arm's repair had been successfully completed. With his arm fully healed, he gripped the sword's handle with all the strength he could muster. Reiji charged forward with everything he had, determined to deliver the final, decisive blow to the monstrous creature. With a cry of rage, he declared that the monster's life now belonged to him. But suddenly, something struck him from behind, and he was completely taken by surprise. One of the Black Knight's tails pierced him, and he couldn't immediately understand how it had happened. Then he remembered that the monster had a hidden tentacle buried beneath the ground, the only one that hadn't been frozen by his special power. The strike hit him directly, brutally, throwing him far away. Reiji looked up, pain and shock etched across his wounded face, blood streaming from the severe injury he had just suffered. With that, Reiji was thrown violently and fell to the ground, completely powerless. He lay there, wounded, unable to rise and continue the fight. Yet even in this dire state, he refused to give up. His eyes still glowed faintly with his remaining power. The interface warned him that the creature could not move, but visibility was poor and uncertain. Completely injured, he struggled to focus though his wounds constantly got in the way. He realized that the red liquid streaming from his body was blocking both his vision and his ability to wield his power. The interface confirmed that chronostasis was unavailable and that both of his arms had been severely injured. Still, he dragged himself across the floor, determined to reach his sword and continue the battle. The genius refused to surrender, reminding himself that he had not yet completed his mission. Meanwhile, the system warned that a high-temperature reaction had been detected within the enemy. The Black Knight readied itself to fire a devastating energy beam from its core. Lying helpless on the ground, Reiji could only watch, unable to act. He lamented silently, recalling that he had wanted to grow stronger only to protect others, and remembered the light he had once seen shining on his older brother's back. With a tired, resigned look, he seemed to accept his fate in the apparent end of the battle. The hero lay on the ground, completely defeated, drained of energy and hope. But suddenly, his older brother Tendo leapt into the air, ready to confront the monster. Reiji was utterly shocked to witness his brother's fearless action. With his sword gripped tightly in hand, Tendo prepared to strike directly at the creature's core. With a fierce battle cry, he descended with all his might, determined to deliver the final, decisive blow. The image of his brave, fearless older brother from the past surged through the younger man's mind, inspiring him to summon his remaining strength. Filled with fury and determination, he refused to be a coward again. Lying on the ground, Ryuji watched in disbelief, unable to fully grasp the courage and resolve he was witnessing unfold before him. Tendo charged forward, gripping his sword tightly, determined to strike the Black Knight with every ounce of strength he had left. He shouted that if he failed now, he would never be able to face the future with any confidence. The creature remained frozen under Reiji's power, unable to defend itself for the moment. Yet the monster's core glowed fiercely, signaling it was about to fire a devastating attack. A powerful energy beam shot directly toward Tendo, moving impossibly fast. Tendo's eyes widened in shock, realizing the attack was coming straight at him with almost no chance to dodge. Even with the beam bearing down, he refused to give up and pressed forward, swinging his sword in defiance. But sword broke. Then another attack launched, creating a massive explosion of crackling purple energy. Tendo realized he could not dodge in time and braced himself for the impact. His eyes went wide as he faced the attack head-on. But suddenly, Reiji threw himself forward, blocking the beam with his own body. Tendo watched in disbelief as his younger brother sacrificed himself to protect him. He glanced at his sword and saw it shattered from the force, instantly understanding that it would have broken if he had tried to stop the beam himself. The Black Knight's attack sent Tendo flying through the air with immense force. Tendo crashed to the ground, dazed, wondering what kind of power the monster truly possessed, knowing it could do almost anything. With a determined look, he forced himself to rise, preparing to continue the fight despite the overwhelming danger. His eyes widened in shock. The Black Knight readied another devastating beam, and Tendo feared this could be the end. He glanced to the side and saw his younger brother plummeting from the sky, severely wounded. With quick reflexes, he caught him in his arms just in time to prevent further injury. His eyes widened as he desperately screamed his younger brother's name, holding him tightly against his chest. The Black Knight observed the scene from a distance, motionless. Tendo stared in disbelief at the massive wound across his brother's chest. Reiji looked gravely injured, and it seemed unlikely he would survive such a strike. Tendo gripped him firmly, asking if his younger brother could hear him. The interface confirmed the alarming truth. Reiji's lifespan was dropping rapidly, now showing only 57 years remaining. The counter continued to decrease rapidly, and Tendo screamed desperately for his brother not to pass on. But with the last of his strength, Reiji insisted that it was not over yet. He refused to accept the man his older brother had become over the years. Memories of their childhood flooded him, when Tendo would drag him around carelessly, full of energy and laughter. Yet he lamented that after that day, Tendo had fallen apart and chosen his own path, drifting away from the person he once was. With a cry of anger and determination, Reiji declared that he would never accept that version of his brother. Tendo was completely stunned by his younger brother's harsh words, staring at him helplessly, unsure of what to say or how to react. Reiji then urged him to move forward, to continue walking without stopping, no matter what. Tendo listened, his heart heavy with emotion. Reiji instructed him to keep walking until the very last second of his life. Tears filled his eyes as Tendo lowered his head, finally understanding the depth of his brother's message. Reiji remembered how in the old days he had always looked forward. Tendo's eyes welled with tears as he absorbed his younger brother's final, powerful words. Reiji declared that no matter what had happened, he would always laugh like a fool, facing life without fear. He added that in the end, he always managed to snatch victory from the hands of anyone who dared challenge him. Hearing these words, Tendo began to cry, remembering who he had been in the past and the person he once aspired to become. Suddenly, his left eye began to glow with an intense, burning red light. He brought his hand to his face, confused and alarmed by the sudden surge of heat and energy. Then, the system interface announced that the transfer of the Regulus weapon had begun. Tendo couldn't believe what he was witnessing, unsure of what this extraordinarily powerful weapon truly was. With the last of his strength, Reiji insisted that if it was for the power to secure victory, Tendo could have it. His red eye shone one final time as the energy transferred into his older brother's body. Overwhelmed by the surge, Tendo felt the power rushing in uncontrollably. The transfer bar climbed steadily, already reaching 17%. With tears streaming down his face, Tendo screamed at his brother, begging him to stop this reckless act before it was too late. But the Reiji insisted that no matter how much he regretted the past, the transfer could not be stopped, and the progress had already reached 52%. Tendo screamed his younger brother's name desperately, begging him to halt the process. Reiji, however, remained steadfast, declaring that no matter how unfair the world was, he could not afford to lose. His final words, Reiji told them that Tendo was his older brother and his true hero. The interface confirmed that the transfer was complete and that the power now fully belonged to Tendo. The creature readied itself, claws sharp, but the time-stopping golden ring is now cancelled. It fired at Tendo in full speed. Tendo still in shock. What just happened? The system then revealed that Regulus Weapon Number 1 carried the chronostasis code. Mizusaki woke with a groan, realizing she had passed out during the battle against the Black Knight. Pain radiated through her body as she struggled to sit up, clutching her head. She saw Captain Mogami as motionless while the Black Knight about to attack, menacing and intact. Ahead, she spotted the captain's older brother preparing to confront the monstrous foe. She ran forward screaming the captain's name, her voice full of anguish and disbelief at the devastating loss. Then suddenly, Tendo's sword shot through the air, stopping mere inches from the Black Knight. The blade hovered in place, and the monster froze, utterly paralyzed. Stuck firmly in the chest, the knight could no longer move. Mizusaki watched in awe as the creature's core began to crack, splintering under the pressure. Tendo recalled that whenever his brother had attacked before, he would restart time, and objects frozen in time remained intact until time resumed. A key he now used to finally bring the Black Knight to its knees. With that, Tendo realized that no matter how strong an enemy appeared to be, it could never be truly invincible if it had a weakness that could be exploited. Filled with rage and determination, Tendo launched himself at the Black Knight's core with every ounce of his remaining strength. His eye glowed an intense red as he shouted that the monster's playtime was over. Stepping close to the creature, he declared that its reign of terror had finally come to an end. With the eye of chronostasis deactivated, he prepared to deliver the decisive final blow. Tendo drove the remaining fragment of his sword deep into the enemy's core. The impact was catastrophic. The Black Knight's core shattered into countless pieces. Brilliant blue energy erupted from within, throwing the monstrous body backward with immense force. Meanwhile, Reigi's body continued to dissolve into tiny particles. We see his face. He's smiling because he's finally seeing his hero. In the sky, the remnants of the Black Knight floated briefly before vanishing completely. Tendo looked upward, his eyes wide with shock at the final outcome of the battle. He glanced down at his hand and felt the immense power he had inherited from his younger brother coursing through him. Suddenly, a sharp cry of pain escaped his lips as the energy surged uncontrollably, throwing him backward with overwhelming force. The remnants of the creature seemed to stare down at him, its presence menacing even in its destruction. From the Black Knight's chest, a blinding white light erupted, catching Tendo completely off guard. Tendo was hurled backward by the intensity of the monster's final explosion, landing on his knees, utterly exhausted and too weak to continue fighting. The blast shattered everything around him, sending clouds of dust swirling throughout the hall. Silence fell over the scene, broken only by the faint echo of lingering energy. Tendo looked ahead and realized that the battle was finally truly over. At that moment, the glow in his eye faded, returning to its natural color. Struggling to his feet, he ran forward, desperately shouting his brother's name into the quiet aftermath. Tendo stopped and gazed at the ground where Reigi had dissolved into countless particles, unable to comprehend the finality of the scene. He stood there, frozen, unsure how to react to such overwhelming sorrow. With a lost, hollow look, he struggled to accept that his brother had sacrificed himself for him. His face was drenched in tears as he screamed Reigi's name again and again, a desperate plea to the one who had given everything for him. Kneeling on the cold floor, he clutched the shattered remains of his sword with trembling hands. From a distance, Mizusaki watched silently, unable to find words or actions that could ease the weight of the moment. Suddenly, a sharp flash of purple light filled his vision, and an overwhelming, terrible image invaded his mind. Tendo recalled the moment his brother had been struck by the monster's attack, the memory vivid and horrifying. The image of his Reigi's severe wounds left him paralyzed with fear. His eyes widened in sheer terror, and he screamed his brother's name over and over, consumed by despair. Then, with a start, Tendo awoke in his own bed, gasping for breath, and realized it had all been a horrible nightmare. He looked around, taking in his room, which appeared perfectly normal and tidy, filled with the quiet familiarity of home. His gaze fell on the clock on the nightstand marking the time, but it offered no comfort. Confused, he decided to take a shower, hoping the water would help him clear his mind. Leaning against the wall as the warm water ran, he widened his eyes, finally thinking with a tired sigh that in the end, it had all been just a bad dream. Suddenly, the system interface appeared on his hand, startling him. The screen displayed his life expectancy, 35 years. At that moment, he realized that it hadn't been a dream. The transfer had truly happened. After finishing his shower, memories of a conversation with his younger brother surfaced. Reigi had mentioned he would be late that night because of an important mission. Tendo had called out to him, offering to pack a lunch to take along. He handed his brother the bag, but Reigi insisted it wasn't necessary. Tendo persisted, explaining that he had packed all the items his relative liked the most. With a serious expression, Reigi finally accepted his older brother's thoughtful gift. He took the bag, preparing himself to leave on what would be his last mission as a raider. Back in the present, Tendo reflected on that day and realized that it had been the last time he ever saw his brother. With a heavy heart, he came to fully understand the truth. His younger brother was gone forever. Then, the doorbell erupted. He ran toward the door as if rushing could somehow change what had happened. Desperately, he dashed down the hall of the house, calling out his younger brother's name again and again. But when he finally opened the door, he came face to face with Mizusaki, his subordinate. Tendo froze, completely shocked, and asked what she was doing there, his voice filled with confusion. Mizusaki, her expression serious, stared at him silently. But suddenly, Mizusaki's stomach starts growling, and hearing this makes the scene a bit awkward. Then, the scene cuts to some time later when Tendo offers Mizusaki an omelet. Mizusaki still blushed, trying to explain herself, but the words wouldn't come. She said she was going to eat, and Tendo found the way she spoke so quickly strangely amusing. With that, Mizusaki picked up her spoon and tried a bite of the omelet he had prepared. Tendo watched carefully, noticing the emblem of the organization stitched onto her uniform. A flashback began, taking him 8.5 hours earlier, right after they had escaped the labyrinth. Several soldiers had surrounded Tendo while he was on the ground, confirming the capture of the sole survivor. The other raiders, however, were shocked that Tendo possessed the Eye of Chronostasis. As they questioned Tendo about their leader, he realized that the emblem on Mizusaki's uniform matched the one worn by the soldiers. They accused him of taking Captain Mogami and shouted for him to stop immediately. At that moment, Mizusaki appeared, revealing that he was the captain's older brother. Yet, one of the soldiers ignored her entirely and brutally stepped on the boy's head. Angrily, Mizusaki shouted that she would not allow anyone to treat him that way. When a man insisted that it was by orders, she took full responsibility, refusing to let the injustice continue. Another raider asked about the captain, and Mizusaki's expression darkened with annoyance. Pain flickered across her face as she remembered her superior's sacrifice during the battle. She held up what remained of the uniform and quietly stated that there was no captain anymore. The other soldiers went completely silent, struck by the devastating news. Then, one of the raiders untied Tendo, Mizusaki instructing them to take him home and saying that was the most they could do for him. Back in the present, Mizusaki finished her meal and thanked Tendo for the food. She was surprised by his cooking skills and asked if he always prepared meals at home. Tendo explained that his brother had been busy, so he had become accustomed to handling the kitchen himself. Mizusaki listened thoughtfully, a slightly sad look crossing her face. On the kitchen table, a photo of the two smiling brothers reminded her of their happiness. Closing her eyes briefly, she reflected on the heavy weight of the situation. Then, opening her eyes, she introduced herself formally, saying, "I'm Yui Mizusaki from the Labyrinth Countermeasure Bureau named Close." Tendo heard the introduction and repeated the organization's name aloud, his voice full of confusion. Mizusaki tilted her head and asked if he had at least heard the name before. She explained that it was a government agency responsible for overseeing the nation's raiders. With a faint smile, she added that they were considered the heroes who protected the people. Tendo stared at her silently, trying to process all the information at once. Then, in a quiet observation, he pointed out that she herself didn't seem to fully believe in the idea of heroes. Mizusaki admitted that his instincts were sharp, even if his appearance was a bit goofy. Tendo responded WYLY. Mizusaki explained that the place did not operate on ideals alone, though there had been one notable exception. With a serious expression, she revealed that among all of them, there had been a true hero, Captain Mogami, the strongest and most exceptional raider in the country. Tendo listened intently as Mizusaki explained that he would now be the center of everything. Tendo shocked what? Confused and still trying to process everything, Tendo asked why he would be the center of all this chaos. Mizusaki pointed to his left eye and revealed the secret behind its power. She explained that the Eye of Chronostasis was no ordinary weapon like the others. It was a Regulus weapon, a force so powerful it could shake an entire nation on its own. She added that he had inherited this incredible power from his younger brother, but the transfer had come at the ultimate cost, his brother's life. The truth hit Tendo like a shockwave, and his red eye widened as he grasped the weight of the sacrifice. Nervously, he let out a shaky laugh, insisting this must be some cruel joke. But then, memories of his brother's final moments flooded his mind, and he felt the unbearable guilt of still being alive. Anger and frustration surged through him, and he clenched his fists tightly against the table. Mizusaki observed his reaction quietly, waiting for him to process it. Finally, she said she had one more critical piece of information. The humanoid enemy from the labyrinth was likely still alive, and the threat had not ended. Tendo froze, shocked, muttering that he had thought they had defeated the monster in the labyrinth. Mizusaki calmly explained that his life expectancy had not increased after the fight. The system interface appeared on his hand, confirming that he still had only 35 years to live. The boy stared at his hand, the weight of his brother's sacrifice crashing down on him. With a cry of rage, he slammed his fist onto the table, lowering his head in frustration. He cursed the situation, feeling powerless, while Mizusaki observed him in silence. After a moment, she asked if he wanted to become a national raider. Tendo blinked in surprise and said it must be a joke. Mizusaki explained that by becoming a raider, he would gain access to the labyrinth and the chance to fight. Tendo remained silent. Mizusaki told him that next time, he would be able to avenge his younger brother. With his head bowed and teeth clenched, he hesitated, feeling useless and confessing that he was only the shadow of his brilliant younger brother. Yet, a spark of resolve began to form within him. With clenched teeth, recalling his brother's final words, to keep moving forward no matter what. He, fueled by the memory of that last moment Reigi had shouted at him not to stop, urging him to press on without surrender. He had told Tendo to keep walking until the very last second of his life, entrusting both his power and his dream to him. Tendo understood the weight of the responsibility and the faith his brother had placed in him. He remembered that Reiji had asked him, with his last ounce of strength, to never lose. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to give his answer to the officer standing before him. He looked out at their photograph, thoughtful and quiet, reflecting on the past. In that moment, he remembered how his younger brother had always seen him as a true hero, a figure worth trusting and following.